The alarm screamed through the corridors of Kepler Station as Captain Jake Morrison watched the Zephyrian warships approach on his scanner. He knew what was coming, but there was nothing he could do about it. The research station had no weapons, no shields, only 3,000 human scientists and their families who had dedicated their lives to understanding the ancient alien ruins on the planet below. "Captain, they're not responding to our communications," reported Lieutenant Amy Parker from the communication station. Her voice stayed calm, but Jake could see her hands shaking as she worked the controls. Jake looked at the massive Zephyrian fleet surrounding their small station. 27 warships against one research facility. This was not a fight. This was an execution. He opened the station-wide communication channel and spoke clearly into his microphone. "All personnel, this is Captain Morrison. Begin emergency. Evacuation procedures immediately. All civilians to the escape pods, this is not a drill." Dr. Lisa Chang ran into the command center, her lab coat still covered in dust from the archaeological dig. She had been studying the alien ruins for 3 years, trying to understand the technology of a civilization that had died out millions of years ago. Her work was important, groundbreaking even, but now it meant nothing. "Jake, we can't leave," she said, breathing hard from running. "The artifacts we've discovered could change everything we know about galactic history. If we abandon this site, the Zephyrians will destroy it all." "Lisa, look at the screens," Jake replied, pointing to the display showing the enemy ships. "They're going to destroy everything anyway, and us with it if we don't get out of here." The communication system crackled to life with an incoming transmission from the lead Zephyrian vessel. The voice that came through was cold and filled with disgust. "Human contamination of this sacred site ends now. You have profaned the resting place of the first ones with your primitive touch. Your presence here is an insult to all civilized species. You have 10 minutes to surrender yourselves for judgment." Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "This is a legitimate research operation approved by the Galactic Council. We have every right to be here under Article 47 of the Archaeological Research Treaty." "Treaties made with primitives have no meaning," the Zephyrian commander replied. "Your species has no business touching the sacred technology of your betters." The transmission ended with a harsh click. Jake looked around the command center at his crew. These were good people, humans who had spent years working peacefully alongside other species, contributing to galactic knowledge and understanding. Now they were being called primitives and told they had no right to exist in this part of space. "Sir, the evacuation pods are ready," reported Sergeant Mike Davis from the security station. "But the Zephyrians are jamming our escape route. The pods won't make it past their ships." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. He had served in the human fleet for 20 years, always believing that humanity had found its place among the stars. They had joined the Galactic Council 200 years ago and had worked hard to prove they belonged. They had shared their technology, their culture, their knowledge. They had fought alongside other species against pirates and invaders. They had helped terraform worlds and cure diseases that plagued alien civilizations. But now, as he watched the Zephyrian ships move closer, Jake realized that none of it had mattered. To these aliens, humans would always be primitives, always be unwelcome, always be less than equal. The first energy blasts hit the station's outer hull. The lights flickered and emergency systems activated. Dr. Chang grabbed Jake's arm as the station shook from the impact. "The research data," she said urgently. "We have to transmit our findings to Earth before they destroy everything. The galaxy needs to know what we discovered here." Jake nodded and turned to Amy. "Send everything to the human colonies. All research data, all archaeological findings, everything we've learned here. Use emergency transmission protocols." As Amy worked frantically at her station, Jake opened a channel to Earth. He knew this might be his last communication with human space, and he wanted to make sure the right people heard what had happened here. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of Kepler Station. We are under attack by Zephyrian forces. They claim we have no right to study the ancient ruins here, despite our legal authorization from the Galactic Council. It appears that our membership in galactic civilization means nothing when other species decide we don't belong." Another blast rocked the station. This time, the lights went out completely. and emergency power kicked in. Through the red emergency lighting, Jake could see his crew working calmly at their stations, doing their jobs even as death approached. These people deserved better than this, he thought. Humanity deserved better than this. Transmission complete? Sir, Amy reported. All data has been sent to the human colonies. Good work, everyone, Jake said to his crew. It's been an honor serving with you. The final barrage from the Zephyrian fleet tore through Kepler Station like paper. The small research facility, with its libraries full of ancient knowledge and laboratories full of peaceful scientists, disappeared in a ball of fire and twisted metal. 3,000 human lives ended in an instant, simply because they had dared to seek knowledge in a place where others thought they didn't belong. Though, news of the Kepler Station massacre reached Earth within hours. Admiral Kate Sullivan received the transmission in her office at Human Fleet Command. She had known Jake Morrison personally, had served with him during the Vegan pirate crisis 5 years earlier. He was a good man, a peaceful man, who had never hurt anyone in his life. Kate watched the recording of Jake's final transmission 3 times before she could bring herself to believe it. Then she called an emergency meeting of the Human Colonial Council. Within 6 hours, every human leader in the galaxy knew what had happened at Kepler Station. Alex Rodriguez was trading supplies on Centauri Prime when he heard the news. He had been dealing with alien merchants for 15 years, building relationships, making friends, creating the kind of peaceful commerce that everyone said would unite the galaxy. But as he watched the news broadcasts, he noticed something that made his stomach turn. The alien traders around him were not shocked by the massacre. They were not outraged. Some of them were actually nodding in agreement with the Zephyrian actions. One Altarian merchant even said, "Perhaps this will teach the humans to know their place." Alex realized in that moment that he had been fooling himself for years. The friendships he thought he had built were illusions. The respect he thought he had earned was fake. To these people, he would always be just a human, just a primitive, just someone who should be grateful for whatever scraps of tolerance they chose to offer him. The Galactic Council meeting that followed the Kepler Station massacre would be remembered as the day humanity learned the truth about their place in the galaxy. And it would be remembered as the day the galaxy made the biggest mistake in its history. Ambassador Sam Parker stood at the podium in the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council. The massive chamber held representatives from over 200 species, all watching him with various expressions of curiosity, boredom, and barely hidden contempt. Sam had served as humanity's chief diplomat for 12 years, always trying to build bridges between his people and the rest of the galaxy. Today he was here to burn those bridges down. Honorable members of the Galactic Council, Sam began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's sound system. I stand before you today to deliver a message from the human colonial government. After careful consideration of recent events and the Council's response to the Kepler Station massacre, humanity has made a decision. The Zephyrian representative, Councillor Vexhai, leaned back in his floating chair with what might have been amusement. The crystalline being had been one of the loudest voices calling for human restrictions after the massacre, claiming that humans brought violence wherever they went. Effective immediately, Sam continued, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council and all associated treaties, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. We are going home. The chamber erupted in noise. Some delegates laughed, thinking this was some kind of negotiating tactic. Others looked confused, as if they couldn't understand what Sam had just said. A few, mostly from species that did significant business with humans, looked genuinely worried. Councillor Thexpai of the Altarian Federation activated his speaking device. Ambassador Parker, surely this is just an emotional response to recent events. Humans have always been dramatic in their reactions. Perhaps a cooling-off period would be more appropriate. Sam looked directly at the Altarian counselor. This is not an emotional response, Councillor Thexby. This is a logical decision based on 200 years of evidence. You have made it clear that humanity is not welcome as an equal partner in galactic civilization. Therefore, we choose to leave, too. But you cannot simply leave, protested Trade Minister Kellish of the Vegan Trade Union. There are contracts, obligations, established trade routes. The economic disruption alone would be enormous. All human contracts will be honored until their natural expiration dates, Sam replied calmly. No new agreements will be made. All existing trade relationships will be terminated within 90 days. You wanted us to know our place in the galaxy. We have learned. Our place is elsewhere. As Sam walked out of the council chamber, leaving his diplomatic credentials on the podium behind him, the real work was already beginning across human space. Admiral Kate Sullivan had been planning this moment since the day after Kepler Station was destroyed. She called it Operation Homecoming, and it was the largest evacuation in galactic history. Commander Beth Taylor stood on the bridge of the transport ship New York, watching as the last human families boarded from the colony world of Haven. The planet had been settled by humans 60 years ago, turned from a barren rock into a green world full of farms and cities. Now those same families were packing everything they could carry and leaving their homes behind. "Ma'am, the demolition teams are ready," reported Lieutenant Tony Martinez from the engineering station. "All human-built infrastructure has been rigged for controlled destruction." Beth nodded. The orders were clear. Nothing useful was to be left behind. Every piece of human technology, every building, every piece of equipment that could benefit other species would be destroyed or taken. If the galaxy didn't want humans as partners, they wouldn't get to keep the gifts that partnership had brought. "Begin the sequence," Beth ordered. "Let's make sure they remember what they're losing." Across the planet's surface, carefully placed, charges detonated in sequence. The terraforming stations that had turned the atmosphere breathable exploded into scrap metal. The fusion power plants that had provided clean energy were systematically dismantled. The medical centers with their advanced human-designed equipment were emptied and then destroyed. The same scene was playing out on 50,000 worlds across the galaxy. Human colonies that had taken centuries to build were being abandoned in a matter of weeks. The humans took their people, their personal belongings, and their knowledge, leaving behind empty worlds and destroyed infrastructure. On the trading station Nexus 5, alien merchant Kixilon watched in growing panic as human ships docked one final time to collect their people and equipment. Kixilon had built his entire business around human trade routes. Human ships carried goods between systems that no other species bothered to connect. Human merchants had the patience and skill to negotiate with difficult species that others avoided. "Wait," Kixilon said, grabbing the arm of Captain Steve Johnson as the human prepared to board his ship for the last time. "You cannot leave. My business depends on your shipping routes. Who will carry goods to the Outer Rim colonies?" Steve looked at the alien trader with tired eyes. "That's not our problem anymore, Kixilon. You and your people made it clear that human involvement in galactic trade was unwelcome. Now you'll have to figure out how to do business without us." "But the Outer Rim species only trust human traders," Kixilon protested. "They say humans are the only ones who treat them fairly, who don't cheat them or look down on them." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you supported restrictions on human activities," Steve replied, pulling his arm free. "Good luck with your business. You're going to need it." As Steve's ship pulled away from the station, Kixilon realized that half the ships in the docking bay were human vessels and they were all leaving. The station would be nearly empty within hours, and most of the trade routes that passed through it would disappear with the humans. Dr. Peter Kim was the last human scientist at the Joint Research Facility on Kepler 9. The facility studied advanced propulsion technology, and Peter's team had been working on a revolutionary new faster-than-light drive system. The project was 90% complete, with testing scheduled to begin in just 3 months. As Peter began deleting files from the research computers, his alien colleague, Dr. Yildar, approached him with obvious distress. "Peter, you cannot destroy this research," the tall, thin alien scientist said. "This technology could revolutionize space travel for all species. Think of the benefits to galactic civilization." Peter paused in his work and looked at his former colleague. "Dr. Yildar, I've worked with you for 8 years. I thought we were friends. But when the council voted to place humans under supervision, you said nothing. When they called us too primitive for sensitive research, you agreed. Why should I leave this technology for people who think I'm too stupid to understand it myself? That was politics, Yildar protested. This is science. Science belongs to everyone. No, Peter said, resuming his work at the computer. Science belongs to those who discover it, and we're taking our discoveries with us. Peter finished wiping the computers and began dismantling the experimental drive core. The technology would leave with him, along with the knowledge of how to build it. The galaxy would have to develop faster than light travel on their own, just like they would have to solve all their other problems without human help. On Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan received reports from across human space. The evacuation was proceeding ahead of schedule. Human merchant fleets were converging on human colonies to transport refugees. Military vessels were escorting the evacuation ships and ensuring that no alien forces interfered with the withdrawal. But the reports also brought disturbing news from the galactic economy. Without human shipping networks, trade between many systems had already ground to a halt. Several minor wars had broken out in regions where human peacekeepers had maintained stability. The galactic stock market was in free fall as investors realized the scope of the human withdrawal. Kate allowed herself a small smile as she read the economic reports. Perhaps now the galaxy would understand what they had lost. But it was too late for regrets. Humanity was going home, and they were taking their contributions to galactic civilization with them. The last human ship left alien space 3 months after Sam Parker walked out of the Galactic Council. Behind them, they left empty colonies, destroyed infrastructure, and a galaxy that was just beginning to understand the magnitude of their mistake. 6 months after the last human ship disappeared into the void, Trade Minister Kellish stared at the economic reports spread across his desk with growing horror. The numbers made no sense at first, but as the weeks passed, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Galactic trade had collapsed by more than half, and it was getting worse every day. How did we not see this coming? He muttered to his assistant, a young Vegan named Pixtal who had been tracking shipping routes since the human withdrawal began. The humans only made up 12% of the galactic population. How could their leaving cause this much damage? Pixtal pulled up a holographic display showing trade routes across the galaxy. Where once there had been thousands of glowing lines connecting star systems, now there were only scattered fragments. Sir, the humans didn't just trade among themselves, they connected everyone else. Look at this route from the Centauri Republic to the Outer Rim territories. Human ships were the only ones willing to make that journey because it required stopping at 17 different hostile systems and negotiating with pirates, warlords, and paranoid isolationists. Kellish studied the display with growing understanding. The humans hadn't just been another species in the galactic economy. They had been the glue that held it together, the only species willing and able to deal with everyone else regardless of politics, prejudice, or danger. On the agricultural world of Kepler-7, Administrator Hexnall watched his people slowly starve. The planet produced only one crop, a grain that grew nowhere else in the galaxy but was essential for feeding billions of beings across 12 star systems. The problem was that no one could figure out how to harvest it anymore. The harvesting machines had been designed and built by humans 50 years ago. They were incredibly complex devices that could separate the valuable grain from the toxic chaff without damaging either. When the machines broke down, as all machines eventually did, human technicians had always come to fix them. Have we heard anything from the Altarian engineers? Hexnall asked his aide, though he already knew the answer. They tried for 3 weeks, sir, the aide replied sadly. They managed to get one harvester working, but it destroyed half the crop it touched. The grain turned toxic when they processed it wrong. 20 people died before we figured out what went wrong. Hexnall looked out at the vast fields of grain that stretched to the horizon. Enough food to feed billions, but without the human-designed harvesters, it might as well be poison. His people were already on quarter rations, and neighboring systems were beginning to report famine. In the research laboratories of the Galactic Science Institute, Dr. Yildar faced a different but equally devastating problem. Every major scientific project in the galaxy had ground to a halt because they all depended on human innovations that no one else understood. The quantum relay network is failing, reported his colleague, Dr. Zarath, a crystalline being whose species had contributed significantly to galactic mathematics. Without human maintenance protocols, we're losing communication nodes across the galaxy. Some systems haven't been heard from in weeks. Yildar nodded grimly. The quantum relay network allowed instant communication across thousands of light years, but it required constant adjustment and maintenance. Human technicians had developed the maintenance procedures through decades of trial and error, learning to work with technology that other species had invented, but never truly understood. What about the medical research? Yildar asked, though he dreaded the answer. Worse, Zarath replied. Dr. Chen's team was 3 weeks away from completing a cure for the Rigel plague when they left. We have all their notes, all their equipment, but we can't make sense of their synthesis process. It's like they were thinking in a completely different way than we do. The Rigel plague was spreading across the outer rim, killing millions. Human medical researchers had been working around the clock to find a cure, using their species' unique approach to biological problems. But with the humans gone, the research had stopped, and the plague continued to spread. General Corthon of the Altarian Defense Force stood in his command center, watching red warning lights blink across the tactical display. The Savage Reach, a region of space that had been peaceful for 30 years, was exploding into chaos. Sir, we're getting reports of pirate raids in 17 systems, reported his intelligence officer. The Colonial Defense Fleet is requesting immediate assistance. Corthon shook his head in frustration. Tell them we can't help. We don't have the ships or the knowledge to operate in that region. The truth was embarrassing. For 3 decades, human military advisors had maintained peace in the Savage Reach through a combination of diplomatic skill, tactical brilliance, and sheer stubborn courage. They had negotiated with warlords, hunted down pirates, and established trade agreements that kept dozens of hostile factions from killing each other. The Altarian military was powerful, but they had never learned how to deal with the chaotic mix of criminals, refugees, and independent colonies that populated the Savage Reach. Human officers had handled those problems, and now those officers were gone. What about the automated defense systems? Corthon asked. Can't we activate the border sentinels? We tried, sir, the intelligence officer replied. But the activation codes were lost when the humans wiped their databases. And even if we could turn them on, we don't know how to program them properly. Human technicians always handled the complex targeting algorithms. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out as alien civilizations discovered how dependent they had become on human expertise. On manufacturing worlds, production lines sat idle because no one understood the human-designed efficiency improvements that had boosted productivity by 300%. On terraformed planets, environmental systems began failing because alien engineers couldn't replicate the delicate balance that human ecologists had spent decades perfecting. Financial analyst Zektron published a report that sent shockwaves through the galactic government. According to his calculations, the galaxy had lost 40% of its technological capability almost overnight. More importantly, they had lost nearly all of their innovation capacity. The numbers don't lie, Zektron announced at a press conference that was broadcast across civilized space. For the past century, humans have been responsible for 86% of all major technological breakthroughs. They didn't just contribute to galactic science, they were the primary engine of galactic progress. The revelation was devastating because it was so unexpected. Humans had rarely taken credit for their innovations, preferring to work behind the scenes and let other species claim the glory. Now that they were gone, it became clear just how much of galactic civilization had been built on human foundations. On the frontier world of New Harmony, Governor Plexnar watched his colony's fusion reactor slowly die. The reactor had been designed by humans and had run perfectly for 20 years. But when it developed a minor fault, no one knew how to fix it. The Centaurian technicians say it's impossible to repair, his chief engineer reported. They claim the reactor design violates several laws of physics, so it shouldn't work at all. Plexnar laughed bitterly. But it has been working for 20 years. The humans made it work. That's what I told them, sir. They said humans must have been using some kind of trick or shortcut that wasn't scientifically sound. As new harmonies, power grid began failing. Plexnar realized that the humans hadn't been using tricks. They had simply understood the technology better than anyone else. Now that understanding was gone, and with it, the foundation of galactic civilization. The worst was yet to come. 2 years after humanity's withdrawal, Counselor Prime Velthar stood in the empty chambers of the Galactic Council, looking out at rows of vacant seats. Half the member species had stopped sending representatives because they could no longer afford interstellar travel. The other half were too busy dealing with crises at home to attend meetings about galactic cooperation. The galaxy was dying, and everyone knew it. Prime Counselor. His aide Septok approached cautiously. We've received another distress signal from the Centauri Republic. The Jektar swarm has broken through their defense line. They're requesting immediate military assistance. Velthar closed his eyes and felt the weight of 2 centuries of civilization collapsing around him. The Jektar were an ancient enemy, a race of mechanical beings that had been contained beyond the galactic rim for generations. Now they were sweeping through civilized space like a plague, destroying everything in their path. What forces do we have available? Velthar asked, though he already knew the answer. The Altarian Defense Force has 3 operational battle groups, but they're already committed to suppressing pirate raids in the Savage Reach, Septok replied. The Vegan Trade Union is refusing to send ships outside their own territory. Most other species are dealing with internal rebellions or system failures. Velthar nodded grimly. Without human peacekeeping forces and military advisors, the galaxy had become a collection of isolated, struggling civilizations. The cooperative spirit that had united hundreds of species was gone, replaced by fear and desperation. Sir, Septok continued hesitantly, there's something else. We've discovered why the Jektar chose now to attack. Tell me. According to our historical archives, humanity had been monitoring the Jektar for the past 60 years. Human deep space scouts had been tracking their movements, predicting their expansion patterns and maintaining early warning systems along the galactic rim. When the humans left, they took all that intelligence with them. Velthar felt his heart sink. The Jektar hadn't suddenly become more aggressive. They had been probing galactic defenses for decades, held back only by human vigilance and preparation. Now, with the humans gone, the mechanical swarm had found the galaxy defenseless and ripe for conquest. On the industrial world of Kepler Prime, Chief Engineer Linzara watched helplessly as her planet's manufacturing capability crumbled. The factories that had once produced starships, medical equipment, and advanced technology for half the galaxy were shutting down one by one. We've lost another production line, reported her assistant, a young technician named Vordan. The automated systems keep malfunctioning, and we can't figure out how to fix them. Linzara walked through the empty factory floor, looking at machines that had run perfectly for decades until human maintenance crews had departed. The equipment was incredibly sophisticated, far beyond what most species could have built on their own. But the humans had not only built it, they had taught it to other species and then quietly maintained it when those species couldn't manage the complexity. What about the backup systems? Linzara asked. Failed 3 days ago, Vordan replied. The diagnostic programs are all in human code that nobody else can read. We have the manuals, but they might as well be written in ancient hieroglyphs. Linzara picked up one of the thick technical manuals that human engineers had left behind. The text was in perfect galactic standard, but the concepts described were so alien to non-human thinking that they were impossible to follow. Humans had approached engineering problems in ways that other species simply couldn't understand or replicate. In the medical centers of a dozen worlds, Dr. Hexaluna fought a losing battle against diseases that had been easily treatable just 2 years ago. Human medical researchers had developed cures and treatments for hundreds of conditions, but when they left, they had taken their knowledge with them. Doctor, the Andorian fever is spreading faster than we can track it, reported Nurse Killmoth. We have the medications that the humans developed, but our supplies are running out and no one knows how to make more. Dr. Hexaluna looked at the nearly empty medicine cabinet. The bottles contained drugs that could save thousands of lives, but the formulas were locked in human databases that had been wiped clean before their departure. Other species had tried to reverse engineer the medications, but every attempt had failed. Human biochemistry was apparently so different from other species that their medical insights were completely unique. "What about the research from the Rigel Institute?" Dr. Hexaluna asked. "Have they made any progress on reproducing the human treatments?" "They gave up last month," Kilmuth replied sadly. Dr. Yildar said that trying to understand human medical research was like trying to teach a fish to fly. Their brains just work differently than ours. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim territories, entire star systems were going dark as the infrastructure built by human engineers finally collapsed beyond repair. The quantum communication network that had connected the galaxy for over a century was failing node by node, leaving civilizations isolated and desperate. Admiral Jaxhorn of the Hegemony Fleet received a transmission that chilled him to his core. It was from an automated probe that had been monitoring the edge of galactic space, one of the few pieces of human-built equipment that was still functioning. "Admiral," the probe's artificial intelligence spoke in a calm human voice that had been programmed decades ago. "This is Deep Space Monitor 17. I am detecting massive Jektar fleet movements in sectors 47 through 51. Estimated enemy strength is 12,000 vessels and growing. Estimated time to core, worlds is 96 hours. This will be my final transmission before enemy jamming makes communication impossible." Jaxhorn stared at the tactical display showing the approaching mechanical armada, 12,000 ships against the scattered remnants of galactic defense forces. It was hopeless. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender broadcasts from the outer colonies. The Jektar are offering to spare populations that submit without resistance." Jaxhorn had fought in dozens of battles during his career, but he had never faced anything like this. The galaxy's greatest military minds had relied on human strategic thinking and tactical innovation for so long that they had forgotten how to fight without human guidance. As reports of the Jektar advance reached the core worlds, panic spread through civilized space. Governments fell as populations demanded answers that no one could provide. Civil wars broke out as species turned against each other, blaming everyone except themselves for the catastrophe. In desperation, the remnants of the Galactic Council authorized one final attempt at communication with humanity. A single ship, carrying the galaxy's most skilled diplomats, was sent toward human space with a message of surrender and pleading. The ship never returned. 3 days later, as Jektar forces approached the galactic core, every remaining communication network in civilized space received the same transmission. It was broadcast on frequencies that had been reserved for human use, frequencies that everyone had assumed were dead. "This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Human Colonial Defense Force." Her voice was older than it had been 2 years ago, tired but still strong. Across the galaxy, beings who had once dismissed humanity as primitive stopped what they were doing and listened. "We have been monitoring galactic communications," Admiral Sullivan continued. "We are aware of your situation with the Jektar. We are aware of the collapse of your infrastructure, your economy, and your civilization. We want you to know that we take no pleasure in your suffering." There was a long pause, and for a moment, hope flickered in 1 billion hearts across the galaxy. "We are not your enemies," Sullivan's voice resumed. "We never were. But we are no longer your guardians either. You made your choice when you decided we were too primitive to share your civilization. You chose to treat us as inferiors, despite everything we contributed to your society. Now you must live with the consequences of that choice." Another pause, longer this time. "However," Sullivan continued, "should you ever truly learn from this experience, should you ever genuinely wish to treat all thinking beings with equal dignity and respect, you know where to find us. Until then, goodbye." The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in silence as the Jektar swarm continued its advance toward the heart of galactic civilization. In the darkness of space, the last automated systems built by human hands continued their lonely work, maintaining what little remained of a civilization that had destroyed itself through arrogance and prejudice. The galaxy had finally learned the true cost of losing humanity. But the lesson had come too late.